successful in some career or working toward it, financially well off and able to spoil me rotten, driving a nice car, no POSs, handsome, possibly male model material, preferably with long hair, sexy, funny, has to be able to laugh with me, not at me, creative, i.e. music, art, etc., sensitive but not gay, romantic but not corny, a good kisser, good in bed, good at kissing my ass, able to cook, because I can't, able to clean, plus not bitch at me for it, able to travel with me, spontaneous, responsible, at the same spiritual level as me, wherever I am at that time, nice to the family, able to go out to dinner a lot, able to afford several trips to Rodeo Drive, nice, patient, especially with me, all or mostly all of these things. Even though I'd changed schools and my love life was looking up, I still wasn't eating. I'd always been thin, but now I was in skin and bones territory. In junior high, when we'd lived in an apartment complex, I'd sneak down to the gym and spend hours on the elliptical machines to burn off the few calories that I'd consumed that day. Now that we were in our own house, I'd do yoga videos in my room or even just secretly jog in place when I thought no one was looking. I'm surprised I didn't wear a hole in my carpet. In PE, while other girls tried to avoid sweating as much as possible, I took every timed mile and game of softball very seriously, not wanting to miss any opportunity for more exercise. I'd come home from school starving and cranky and hoped that my mom didn't notice. I needn't have worried, because for the most part, she didn't. She had my brother and sister to deal with, both of whom were still in elementary school. The family was starting to have money problems again, and though she and my dad were back together, they were fighting more than ever, to the point where sometimes I'd have no choice but to round up Michael and Michaela and usher them out the door, talking about how fun it would be for the three of us to go to the park for a while. But by the time I was a sophomore, I started to get the feeling that what had begun as a game had maybe gone too far. One day, I was so hungry that I was shaking, and I decided to eat an apple. Instead of eating it, though, I just sat there and held it up to my mouth. Couldn't bring myself to take a bite. It was like the two sides of my brain were competing, one of them telling me to eat it, it's just an apple, and the other telling me, no, that'll ruin everything. My parents were starting to clue in, and I also felt like I was losing control. It turns out that routinely denying your body nutrients and being hungry 24/7 is a great way to bring on a mental freakout. I finally worked up the nerve to tell my dad that I thought I was anorexic, which was a slap in the face to my parents. I don't think that either of them had even known anyone with an eating disorder before, and while they knew it was a big deal, they still had no idea what to do about it. At one point, my mom even said, "Naya, this is some white people shit." When we would all sit down to dinner as a family, I'd go to great pains to hide the food, so that it would still disappear from my plate, even though I hadn't eaten a thing. Our dining table was this big wooden hunk with drawers on one side, which was super convenient for me. When no one was looking, I'd scoop the food into the drawer and quickly shut it again. Usually I'd come back to get it later and throw it away, but not always. So gross, right? I was like Brittany Murphy's character in Girl Interrupted with the chickens. One day my mom opened the drawer and found a bunch of rotting mashed potatoes and old chicken breasts that I'd stashed in there who knows when and forgotten about. For the obvious reasons, she flipped and came screaming into my room. She started wailing on me. I was running from her and she yelled, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? This is sick. This is sick. You need help." I knew I needed help, and she should probably be the one to help me. This only added fuel to the fire of our disintegrating relationship. The war between moms and their teenage daughters is an epic one fought in households around the world, and in the case between me and my mom, we both had enough of our own shit going on that we had a hard time putting ourselves in each other's shoes. My mom has never been a great communicator, and she's also a tough-ass lady. It's one of the qualities I admire most in her, but she does struggle with empathy. She's the last person on earth who's going to feel sorry for you, and at this point in my life, that was all I wanted. It didn't and wasn't going to happen, though, and so on the pages of my journal that weren't filled with calorie-counting lists of everything I'd eaten that day and social climbing plans, I'd scrawl, "I hate my mom," over and over. July 3rd, 2001. I hate my mom. She's a bitch. I wish she would love me back the way I love her. If she read this, she would probably beat me up. I hate her. July 22nd, 2001. Journal. I don't hate my mom. I just don't like her a lot of the time. At the worst of it, I was 5'4" tall and weighed 98 pounds. I passed out from dehydration when we had to run a mile in PE, during which I really pushed myself. I had to be taken to the hospital to get an IV. Since it had already been established that my mom was not well equipped to deal with this, most of it fell on my dad. He picked me up from school and took me to the hospital, and we sat there, mostly in silence, as I got a needle in my arm. "Naya, you've got to eat," he'd say. "I don't know what else to tell you. You're killing yourself." I'd nod, with tears streaming down my face, but then I'd be right back up on my feet after the IV, and the next day I'd throw my lunch in the trash once again. After an additional hospital visit, my dad seemed to realize that something drastic needed to be done, and that he was going to have to be the one to do it. Someone told him he should take me to see a psychiatrist, so he did, but the visits were as useless as I would have expected them to be. November 6th, 2001. I can't take this. I'm starving. I just had a frickin' breakdown because I couldn't even eat an apple. I don't want to tell anyone because they'll just think it's old and be annoyed. I don't have a problem, I just suppress my hunger. I can't stop thinking about it. It's driving me crazy. All I think about is what I've eaten today and what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Dad would come and pick me up after school, and then drive me to the psychiatrist's totally depressing and incredibly sterile-looking office. I'd sit on the couch and get asked a bunch of predictable questions. He'd ask me over and over again why I'd felt the need to do this, a question that I could readily answer. Not eating made me feel in control. I'd already self-diagnosed. I knew why I did this. If the guy had been worth his copay, he probably would have realized that it was my control issues that needed to be addressed here, and that by working on them, the eating disorder would probably resolve itself. Instead, he decided that I must be depressed, and prescribed Lexapro, an antidepressant. My parents aren't pill-popping people, so I think under normal circumstances they would have balked at putting their teenage daughter on psychotropics. But at this point, they were at their wits' end and willing to try anything that an expert told them would work. "I've never dealt with anything like this before," my mom would say. "I wish I knew how to help you." I was prescribed a very small dosage, but still, taking the pills made me feel weird, like I was 2 steps removed from everything around me. I hated feeling out of it, so I secretly started to throw the pills away while pretending to take them. I knew that something was wrong with me, but I also knew I wasn't depressed. Finally, I told my parents that I wanted to stop taking the pills, which really meant that I was ready to stop having to pretend that I was taking the pills. There was an unspoken understanding among the 3 of us that since I had gotten myself into this, I would somehow know how to get myself out. And I did. Toward the end of my sophomore year of high school, I became friends with a group of black girls at school who, unlike the white girls I knew who considered a Slim Fast bar to be a meal, had no desire to be skin and bones. They preached to me about how guys like thick girls with asses and curves. Since at this point in my life my only guy experience was my 12-hour relationship with Stuart, I decided that I should probably try to get another boyfriend. These girls were friends with a bunch of jocks, and since there were a couple of guys on the football team I wouldn't mind making out with, that, amazingly enough, was all it took to get me to start eating again. Soon, instead of agonizing over an apple, I was going through the McDonald's drive-thru twice a day. I gained 15 pounds and never looked back.